So, Doc, what's happening otherwise?
Nothing exciting, just this, patience, webinars between these. I think Priyanka's just started back her Cogworks program just this today, isn't it, Priyanka? So we don't know.
Yeah, for the past 1 week, we've been doing it online. So, I mean, it's going good. Like a little bit of difficulty when they are trying to, some people think it's a movie because they're finding it hard to communicate through laptop. So we had this one
Bala
patient.
knows about our Cogworks program. So
I think he does.
I don't know if you know about our Cogworks program.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
You're supposed to get back to me with some proposal.
I know. After that, this whole lockdown started. So me and Purnima, we haven't gotten back to it either. So we'll start working on that. But Cogworks is the program I mentioned that day. We run it for people with dementia and also for healthy adults. So it's a group program.
Oh, yes. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So now we are doing it online actually. So we had suspended it for over a month, but now we thought we'll restart it online. So some are actually doing really well, but for some, the online medium is not really appealing or adjustable. So we're still working around it, but so far so good.
Hey, your video is frozen.
Oh,
I think there's a little bit of a lag, so we can usually.
Yeah, no, you are okay. You are perfectly okay.
Yeah.
But when
Priyanka, when you're talking, what's happening is your video is freezing, but we can hear you. That's what's happening.
I don't know, actually, it's showing full connectivity. I'm not sure what's going wrong. And there is no other device connected. Is there any other things that I'm supposed to do? There are no videos connected, no other devices connected. It's just this.
Yeah. Okay. We got about 30 people waiting, which is not a bad number before 5 o'clock. So that should go up. So we're going to invite them, and I think we'll start.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think we should go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go. We got about 30, which is not a bad number to begin with. Who's this? Hello. Hello. Okay, we are recording this program in case you want to use it later.
Hi everyone, welcome to our show today. We are Hoopsters, the League of Action Heroes. So before we start off the program, a few simple directions for you. So the first thing that I request all of you to do is please switch to speaker mode. What the speaker mode will do is it will help you see whoever is talking at that time. And all of you will be mute through the show so that there's no disturbance. We are encouraging a lot of questions from the audience because this is a subject like that. So if you have any questions, you can leave them on the group chat and we'll get back to it through the show. If you have anything else to say, whatever communication you want to do, will be through the chat alone. We will not be unmuting participants to the show. All right, I think we're ready to start. And over to Bala.
Hello everybody, good evening. I'm Bala. Welcome to Hoopsters, the League of Action Heroes. The subject we are talking about today is not only important for parents, but also for teachers and the entire community at large. For the parents of children with special needs, there are some basic things that are a challenge. helping the child integrate within the society, concerns about the future of the child, getting over their own guilt factor, and so on and so forth. As for the rest of us, given all the exposure and education we have, we find it challenging while interacting with special needs children and their families. There are always many questions in our minds. Are we saying the right things? Should we or not be sympathetic? And things like that. So in the process, we develop a sense of awkwardness around these children as well as their families. In my parents and children needs remains a taboo, and the social stigma, which in turn results in fear and denial, preventing most parents from reaching out to experts early. And the only one losing out in the whole process is the child. Being aware and having an understanding of the resources available by us can not only open a whole new world of possibilities for the child. That is what our special program, The Beautiful Mind, is all about. We help simplify mental health. The idea is to increase awareness so that seeking help is no longer a taboo. In our program today, on the third most common special needs among children, we have with us from Green Oaks Initiative, Dr. Sowmya Krishna, consultant psychiatrist, and Priyanka, psychologist and psychotherapist. They'll be shedding light on these issues, providing tips to deal with the special needs children, and we'll also be answering questions from the audience. So if you have any questions for our experts, please leave them on the chat box. Welcome to our show, and let's get started. Doc and Priyanka, my first question to you is, what exactly do you mean by special needs?
First of all, thank you, Bala, for taking this,
Audio.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, first of all, thank you very much for arranging something like this. I think it's the need of the
Doc, audio is low. You've got to keep the mic close to you.
Now?
Yeah.
Is this better?
Better.
So I'm glad that we're having a conversation like this, and I think it's high time that these are conversations we started having out and about in the open. And I guess the background that I come from is the Green Oak Initiative is about these community conversations and having awareness. So coming to your question, Bala, I think, on what does special needs mean? Now, special needs, or different needs as I'd like to call it, it covers a wide range of features or difficulties that a child or a young person may be experiencing. So often the very mild difficulties, it may be when they reach high school or a higher class, that their difficulties or deficits come to the forte of teachers or parents. But some of them who have very significant needs, like moderate to severe needs, tend to get noticed early on when they're about 3 or 4. So the early hallmarks usually are, when somebody's got delay in developmental milestones, like somebody's got speech delay or motor delay, or they're not able to integrate, or a child that has a very difficult temperament. So often parents worry about this, and usually the pediatrician is somebody that usually picks them up quite early on. So often you can see children with special needs presenting as often what they call difficult children with lots of challenging behaviors. So you may find a child who is crying incessantly, being aggressive for no reason, biting at school, fighting with everybody. And it may be a hallmark that there's something going on there. So there's some different needs that need to be assessed. Or you may find that a child is unable to converse, or like I said, at the very severe end, they just aren't able to talk at all. They're not able to attend to any of their needs. They're not able to wash, bathe themselves, feed themselves. So it is a wide spectrum. So special needs it can present at different points in a child's life.
It's interesting. Now, today when you go and talk to people, especially say with parents and teachers, there are words like which are just thrown around very flippantly, like autism, dyslexia, ADHD,
Yeah.
And these are just, people use it it's like depression. Everybody's sad, it's depressed kind of story. And what's happening out there is that most of these children are being branded. If his child is not doing something, okay, he's autistic. If the child is not doing something, he's got ADHD or doing something. So what are your thoughts on that?
Right. So I think I have mixed views about having a diagnosis, and if you look at psychiatrists or working with young people or children, they're often not quick to diagnose somebody. So if anybody's ever met a child psychiatrist or psychologist, they go through a whole period of assessments and serial assessments before they actually say this person has got a certain diagnosis. And the reason is exactly what you're saying, Bala, that once they have a particular label, it kind of sticks with them through their life. And in some cases it actually prevents them from getting the right kind of help that they need, or it may ostracize them from certain groups and communities that they should really be accessing. So in a sense, diagnosis too early on without a lot of thought put into it can be quite harmful for the child. Having said that, in certain groups, having a diagnosis gives people a framework to understand their child's difficulties. It may give the school a framework to understand a child's difficulties and put interventions in place for a child's development. For instance, somebody with ADHD, like you mentioned, a child with ADHD is going to be very hyperactive, may not have enough attention, but they have no issues with their intellectual development. They're intelligent children. So if the teacher and parents are able to streamline what amount of work they give, the child will thrive. So knowing that a child has ADHD and making the necessary interventions or changes around them can actually help the child thrive a bit better. So I think I have mixed feelings about branding, and I definitely feel we have to be thoughtful before we say somebody's got ADHD or whatever. The other difficulty, psychologically, it affects a child's development because it reduces a child's persona to just the diagnosis sometimes. So I have a lot of adults who've had ADHD as a child who the first thing they'll tell you when you ask them what about them is, oh, I had ADHD. So it kind of reduces you to just the diagnosis. So I think we've got to be very cautious about it.
That's interesting. Doc, in your meeting people in your clinic or whatever practice you do, what is the trend you're seeing in the confusion among parents while accepting that their child is having a problem?
I think it's a lot of the again, I see parents at different stages when they've of a child's problem, and I think it is very, very hard for a parent to accept that their child has a problem to start with. And if you don't spend enough time explaining what that problem entails, the parents are just going to feel just as confused. Like you said, they're going to come and they're going to seek different opinions. That's what I see in India, where before they've come to see me or a psychiatrist, they've gone to so many different people. They've done a lot of shopping around to say, is my child okay? Because they want to hear a professional saying, actually, everything's okay with your child. And sometimes they're not. And I think so they come with a lot of expectations, but also with a sense that, they've been let down by people. So I think it is a process for parents. I think the best, again, what happens with the children is what should happen with the parents. Give them time to ask questions, to be able to get the right information. That is what helps them accept certain things.
Okay, since today's subject is about slow learning and hyperactivity, what are the first symptoms of these two case issues?
So, not symptoms as such, maybe early on features. Like I said, usually any developmental delay is a sign for you to be more wary. So if you know your child isn't speaking even when they are 3, 4 or older, or they're not walking at a certain point, I think these are all signs for you to get additional assessments done, because intervening at an early stage has better prognosis sometimes. So getting a speech therapist involved perhaps can help them progress further. So, and as they progress further, the signs and symptoms may be that, you get lots of complaints from the school saying, your child was distracted in class, they were disruptive in class, or that their grades are always below a certain mark in certain subjects. Again, unfortunately, the emphasis always goes into the problem areas. A lot of these children also have some great skills in certain aspects which never get mentioned in parent-teacher meetings. Writing difficulties, so they may have bad handwriting, some of them. Reading difficulties may be there. So they come with a variety of problems.
Doc, most of these cases need not be full blown. They could be borderline cases, right?
Yeah.
So do these borderline cases actually get worse? So how do we deal with it?
So getting worse depends on what aspect gets worse. So in the UK, the emphasis is that anybody with borderline to mild learning difficulties should be in mainstream education. And the rationale for it is that sometimes peer support in itself might help people get a bit better. So so sometimes transitions can be very hard. As it is for children, transitions are hard. For instance, let's say when you change schools, when you go to high school, the puberty, adolescence, all these are transitions that are hard. So in somebody who already has special needs, this may be exaggerated. So you might suddenly see that your child becomes very withdrawn, or they suddenly new behavioral changes that you see. They start lashing out, they're kicking off, they stop eating. So often you see behavioral changes when things are getting worse.
I mean, we have a lot of questions coming in, which we'll definitely take later.
Okay.
But ask the participants to keep on sending the questions because
Sure.
they are important to the whole conversation.
Sure.
So when and how should the parents seek help?
I think the earliest signs that you notice, keep a tab on things. So if you notice that, let's say your child isn't doing what you think should be happening, and again being very pragmatic about it. Okay. So first thing is if your child has any developmental delay or any odd behaviors in their childhood, definitely seek help at that point. But let's say you're constantly noticing your child is presenting with behavioral problems, or that they're constantly failing a certain subject. It may actually be nothing to do with the child also. I mean, it's not always the child who has a problem. Maybe that's a time for you to have a conversation with a school psychologist, an educational psychologist to start with. I would suggest the parents meet with professionals before they take the children, because I think it's very anxiety provoking as it is to see a healthcare professional. So you don't want your child to be subjected to more anxiety.
Don't they say, in case of addiction, for example, or in depression, there's a small difference between being depressed and being sad, right?
Yes.
So in the case of child development and say issues, which are various things, slow learning and stuff, could it just be that the child is taking longer to learn? How do you differentiate between, people say, yeah, your grandfather also took long time to learn, so it's okay. So they bring in genetics or hereditary.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how do you differentiate with these two?
So that's why you've got to be very pragmatic about these things. So if you have a group of people, and it's also about parental expectations. So let's say your child is able to read the basics, but is not able to spell like a fancy word when they're in grade 1. So it's about the parents reducing the expectation to say, this is what is enough for my child. So these are conversations that you have with your teacher to ascertain what the large bunch of students are doing. Also, like you said, genetic factors, sometimes it is that it may be that in your family you've had people who've had difficulties with certain things, so you've inherited those genes as well. Also about whether the environment for your child is conducive for learning. Sometimes children in the UK, we use the term subcultural IQ. So you see that in groups of people where the emphasis is not on learning, that the child doesn't learn. It's not because the child has low intellect. It's just that the environment is such that. So you've got to factor that in as well. Is your home environment conducive for learning? It may be that it isn't. So maybe that's why the child isn't.
Now, also even in 21st century, I come across a lot of parents who get very upset when you tell them that there's some issue or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
How does a parent first of all get over the three aspects here? One is a stigma and taboo which the society puts around the situation, and their own personal guilt somewhere, because somewhere deep down they know there's a problem. How do they overcome all this and then go to seek help?
Which is why the first thing that parents should do is first they have to be able to go and seek help first, because what we know generally with children is if the parents hello, what we know is that if parents are able to manage their anxiety, half of the anxiety of the child is managed. So if you look at it, a lot of the intervention strategies for children with difficult needs is managing parents. So there are lots of parent training programs that we deliver. So the guilt, and it takes time. So just like no two children are on the same page, no two parents are also on the same page. So some parents are very pragmatic, they accept it and they're like, okay, what do we do next? For some people, it takes a long time. So it may be sometimes that, parents also need that additional help or support.
So my next question, anybody, any interesting questions from audience? Okay. It happened to me personally where I have noticed that there's an issue with the child. But how do you tell this to the parent? It's a very delicate matter.
Yeah. You have to tell them if you see that there is a problem. By not telling them that there's a problem, you're stigmatizing it more. But again, taking an approach that isn't reductionist. So, for instance, let's say a child does have ADHD, for instance. It doesn't mean that all the features of ADHD are applicable to a particular child. So it is about how you contextualize that diagnosis to that person and also focus on the strengths of the child. Because you have to remember that the parents spend most of the time, more time with the child and are very important in the development. So you're giving them skills. The way you are talking to them is what they are also going to internalize, and that might help them fight that stigma as well. So the language you use is very important in terms of how you tell the parents. And you have to be patient. The first time is not going to be the time that they're going to accept it. They may have questions, they may dismiss what you're saying, they may go and seek 100 opinions, and so all of that is going to happen, and you've got to be prepared to just be there like the rock and let them ask the questions. So just like you give the child time, give the parents enough time.
Most of this, the child spends about 6 hours in school or 7 hours in school. The teacher's going well. The parents spend the rest 4-5 hours at home. Now, what should the communication be between the teacher and the parent?
Okay.
As far as child is concerned.
Okay. I think this is a very, I'm glad you brought this up, because Priyanka and I worked with a young person, and I want to share that with you and then answer the question as we go along. So I'll let Priyanka tell you about this person and, what we did. So where we are at the moment. Yeah. Priyanka, over to you.
Yeah. So that's actually a really good question, because a lot of the times there is not a lot of constructive communication between all the three modules. Like if a therapist is working with the child, the therapist, the parent, and the teacher have to know what is happening with one another, and that we will be able to help the children better. So we actually dealt with this adolescent who really was withdrawn in school, who could not really mingle with the peers, and he had like frequent episodes in school and wasn't able to really attend to education or academics at all. So we actually started working with him in a holistic way. Like we thought about how he's performing in school and how the school counselor and the teacher could help. And I worked with him twice a week continuously in making a routine, keeping up a schedule for him, and tending to his emotional needs as well as of to how he felt, like, in the classroom, and what was it that was not really helping him to be productive at that point. And so we actually had only 1 month to work with him. And since we all work together, like a therapist tending to the emotional need and keeping up a schedule, and the teacher actually doing something similar in the school to help him out, and the parents also like supporting this from the home, he actually could continue with his studies, and he scored 60% more than what he actually would. And so that is the difference that really astonished all of us, because we understood how important it was to work together as a team. So a parent and a teacher should have a communication as of to how the child is at school, because some children tend to be very different in school than how they are at home. Another child, for example, till adolescence, the parents did not realize there was anything wrong, because at home the child was fine and they thought she was just quiet. But in school, she did not really talk to even one peer throughout her school time. And this later came as a shock, because the parent did not know at all that the child was so quiet in the class. And suddenly, after 16 years, everything came together, and then it was just like, okay, everything has just come together, because we didn't realize it earlier. So it is very important to keep in touch, not to be intrusive, but at least to keep in touch to what's happening with the child.
Doc, you have anything to say add to this? Hello, Doc, can you hear me?
You're on mute.
I think we lost Doc here.
No, she's in mute. She's in mute.
Okay.
Can you just unmute yourself, Sowmya?
Doc, are you there?
Now, yeah, now I'm okay. I think the host had muted me, so I couldn't unmute myself. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Right, yes. I'm here.
Yeah, I mean, do you have anything to add to what Priyanka said so far?
No, I think if anything, the point I think she was making is consistency is very important when you're working with children. A joined up approach is always helpful. And the third thing is being realistic about expectations. So when you're clear what the outcome is, it's fine. So with this young boy I'm sorry? I can't hear you, Bala. Okay, yeah, now I can. So the mic. So being realistic about expectations. So with this boy, he was somebody who was actually an A+ student whose grades had fallen. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Whose grades had fallen. So the expectation automatically would be that if he took a test, he'd get an A+. But what we did here was to say, actually, he will get to A+, but it's going to be a process. So it may be that, we contextualize, we just give him smaller tasks to do. So a lot of the work Priyanka did was what I think teachers would call an individualized educational plan. So trying to look at his syllabus, what is the bare minimum he needed to do to get through the exams for that year. And had the parents or teachers not got on board with that, had they expected us to say, no, he needs to get a distinction, we would have failed miserably there. Because there was no way that child could have coped with it. So I guess it is about being realistic about your priorities. Consistency is key. And the amount of conversations we've had amongst us, we even used to have meetings with the school every 4 weeks, on Zoom and, with the parents. So I think it is all of us knowing what we are doing.
Yeah, since we are in the topic of engaging the child in school, what about the engagement of child with the parents at home? How do the parents engage the child?
So just I think Priyanka can answer this because she's worked a lot with the parents as well. Yeah.
Sure. Tell us some stories of what you've come across.
Yeah.
Right. So, so engaging with the child at home, I feel like it is in different aspects. So one would be a routine or independence of the child. So that's something that we generally work with parents. So sometimes when the child is not doing something right with the personal hygiene or something else, the parents tend to take over. So sometimes we work with teaching the child how to do it. It takes time, and setting up a routine takes time. But even then, training them or teaching them, helping them to form it on their own might be difficult in the beginning. But once the routine is set, once they learn how to do it, then it becomes a little easier for the parents. So, and also having a routine is easier for the child because it avoids that uncertainty or planning. Like as of to what am I supposed to do next? What is there to be done tomorrow? So having a rough schedule or a routine for the child is actually something that we found really helpful and something that actually helps parents as well. And the second thing with academics, we tend to focus a little more on, again, as Sowmya mentioned earlier, what is reality? What is it that we can do? And not have expectations that are really stressful for the child, and being consistent on that, like throughout. So if the child is struggling with academics, finding out what is the child struggling with? Is it in understanding, or is it in reproducing it? Or is it even keeping it in memory? So which part of academics is hard for the child? So that way parents can engage in the school homework, they can engage the child in studies at home itself. So that really helps in understanding where they struggle and supporting them in that. And also with some children, I've found that having a separate physical space to study is helpful. So usually parents who struggle to keep the child as engaged in academics at home, having a separate space as of to this is a desk where we're going to do homework and this is going to be consistent throughout, that really helps them, because then they know, okay, when this is the time I'm sitting there, and when I sit here, it's my time to study. Yeah. And another engagement we found, again, very, very useful is art. So most of the kids who feel a little left out in school, or who left out in academics, they really find a peace and purpose in art. So, and making the art a little more meaningful, and this especially with adolescents. So with children, like, okay, a paint and paper excites them, But when they grow older, for them, it's that their perception changes. They're like, what is the point of paper and paint? I want to do something more. There is no point in this. So then we start finding more meaningful art for them to engage in. Okay, so if you don't want to just use the paper, you can use a pot. Paint the pot and we'll do gardening with it. And you can take the flower from it, or you can take whatever that comes out of it. So like then they start decorating their room, making photo frames. So this kind of art is more meaningful. And this we have seen like in different age group of children, different kind of art works with them. But having a meaning to the art is something that we found very engaging. And parents are also being able to engage with the child in that. And they express a lot more when it comes to it. And with communication, we found that go along with the child as of to see where the child is. They might not be able to have a conversation as we are having, but it's okay. So if they're understanding something a little lesser, let's go to their level and then talk. So if they have ideas that are concrete, then let's try and communicate it a little concretely, or have a little specific things, short conversations, so that they can understand us better. So sometimes some parents come, they're like, I'm talking to her, but she's not understanding it. But that's because we are talking like how we would normally talk, very fast with a lot of complex sentences. But understanding what the children can understand and going to their level really helps us communicate with them better. So that is another thing of engaging with the parents. Anything more, Sowmya? Like, did I miss out something?
No, I think that is a key point. Trying to find an activity. Often art-based activities are things that most children enjoy. But the rationale is, imagine you're a child and everybody's constantly telling you, you don't do this right, you don't do that right. So having an activity with the parents takes the emphasis away from the child. And it's quite nice for the child to just be there, and the emphasis is an activity, the focus is an activity. And it helps foster relationships between parents as well. So that's a way of communicating where, both of you are spending time, mom and dad are spending time with me, but they're not necessarily saying, Array, you don't know how to do 1 + 1 is 2. Array, you don't know how to spell this word. So it's quite nice for the child. So I would say, activities at home would help, but again, communication. So if you're a therapist or a psychologist working with a child, whatever I'm telling the child, I should be telling the parents as well. So there is consistency.
And also it's okay for it to be not perfect. That's one thing that we again emphasize. So like even while painting, parents, sometimes it's okay, like we have expectations of the roof should be brown. But if it's okay, it's pink. Like if they find their imagination that it's different. So not lowering our expectation to not being perfect, and that's okay for it to be not perfect. So that's something that again we have to keep in mind.
That's interesting. Thank you. I also come across a lot of cases where, I meet people, I don't deal cases, I meet people where one of the spouses has, it's a blame game. When the child has some issue, it's a blame game between the couples, okay? So what should the parents prepare themselves for? Or the couples, prepare themselves for when they realize that their child has an issue? A lot of cases where the men have left the wife, the mother's home and disappeared and stuff like that. And it's quite a common number of cases. I really come across a lot of them. So what should the parents actually be prepared for?
So the parents should definitely try and find a space where they can access support. That support may come from their friends, their families, or from a professional. Because sometimes we're all human. Just because you've given birth to a child doesn't mean the child's not going to make you angry. And if it's a child who has special needs, it's much, much harder. It's draining on you physically and emotionally. So you can't always be angry with the child, because like you said, Bala, earlier, there's a lot of guilt and associated. A lot of parents with children who have special needs have a lot of guilt that they have, so they can't say anything to the child. So sometimes that gets displaced into the relationships around them. So having a very concerted plan and having a concerted communication system is very helpful. So I would say parents try and talk. The second thing that happens with couples is they isolate themselves. When you have a child with problems, either because of the guilt or shame, or because they're so busy, they don't see their normal social circle. And that also affects relationships.
Yeah, you got the next question I will, get on to it. So how do you get to the society and talk about your issue? Okay. Because parents find it very difficult to talk about an issue with the child at home. Mm-hmm. So how do you go to your circles and talk to your friends or family or relatives or whatever?
Okay. First thing is, give yourself time to first process it yourself. As a parent, you need to understand what's happening to your child, and then come up with a language that in which you are able to explain that to other people, because the more you talk about it, the less you stigmatize. So for instance, let's say you have a child who has autism or Asperger's and who's very averse to loud noises. So don't take them to a party straight away. So you may decide to take them to a gathering of close friends, but in advance have a chat with them and say, "Hey, listen, my child has been diagnosed with this, which means that when there are people who are noisy, he may shout, okay? But also he enjoys this. He enjoys listening to music. So if you start talking to him about music, he might get more amenable." So what you're actually doing there is you have said that your child has a problem, but you've also given your friends and family a cue on how to engage your child. Okay. So then they're not feeling anxious, because like you said earlier, people are always treading on eggshells around this, because they're like, should I be okay, should I mention the special needs, should I not? So it helps the other people also respond in a certain manner, and do it in a graded manner. That's the other thing.
Okay, you have dealt with your issue of talking to your society, okay, your social circles.
Yeah.
But how do you get the child to engage with his social circle, his friends, and people around him?
Okay. I think maybe this is something Priyanka can say, because this is something she does. Yeah.
So first, again, noticing what exactly is the child feeling when they are in a social circle. So often what I hear from parents is, she used to have so many friends, now she doesn't talk to anyone. So that is because the child is not feeling like they're fitting in that new social circle that is there. Like they sometimes try and fit in another place. Like, so I used to have this one client who was in high school, but she often identified with people younger than her. So she couldn't really relate to her peers or like really talk to them, because she always identified with another group. But the parents were worried that she's not mingling with this particular group. So when we talked to her, when we found out what exactly was she feeling, was really awkward, or not being able to like connect with the conversations that they were making. So once we try and resolve the issues one by one, slowly the child could actually like engage in not a full-fledged conversation, but at least have a cordial relationship with like her peers, like just say hi, how are you? So it's also, first, I think it's important to identify how they're feeling, and second, not expect them to have like a full social life, but slowly start incorporating it like one by one. And if the child is having two friends, that's still fine. Like, how about the quality of relationship more than quantity? That matters here. So with the two people, how good is their relationship? How are they being able to engage with them? So that becomes more important. So once we work with how they are feeling, then slowly they tend to start making progress with other people, mingle with other people. And us not being very particular about what kind of people we want them to mingle with, that also really helps to find out where are they feeling comfortable actually. So that is one thing.
Thank you. Okay, one of the other things which you come across are parents actually checking out the internet for answers. I hear this complaint, a lot of doctors and a lot of experts who say, listen, they come and tell us what is wrong, what to do. And so the question I want to ask is, what should parents do? Should they go on the internet and come back to doctor and tell him what to do? Or how do you deal with it?
Right. I mean, you can't stop people from looking at the internet. And I think it comes from a place of concern. So when parents see that their child is different, they often have checked it out with people around them, their friends, family, or the internet. Because see, the mind wants answers. You want to know what's going on here. Am I overreacting? Is this really, reasonable of me to be worried about my child? So I don't think we can stop them from using it, but maybe we look at collating a list of authentic websites that parents can have access to, where they can look at meaningful information. It isn't helpful to diagnose your child before you come, but a lot of the parents know that there's something wrong. So the difficulty is when somebody comes and says, I think my child has got ADHD, what do you think? I think that's where the difficulty starts. So maybe during the conversation they can ask questions, they can ask the professional questions about, is this ADHD? If it were ADHD, what would it manifest as? Because that's what you're looking for. If it were ADHD, what would my child be doing? Because you don't want to miss something in the child. So unfortunately, we can't do anything about it, but we can certainly collate a list of resources for parents to look at. And I'm also conscious that not every professional has got the luxury of time. So the parents may not get enough time with all the professionals to go through all their questions. So maybe as professionals, we also need to give them list of resources where they can go and look up information.
Doc, anything else you want to say to the audience today?
Well,
I want to be taking the questions from them after this.
Two key things is, if you think there's something going on with your child and you know your child well, do talk to a professional to just make sure you're not anxious, because sometimes holding on to the anxiety makes the problem much worse than what it actually is. Be consistent where possible, and most importantly, look after yourself. If you have a child who's different, it isn't easy. So I think try and create a circle around you that is supportive. So you need to create a social support system around you.
I mean, that's exactly what Hoopsters plan to do. We plan to build an ecosystem to support parents with children of special needs. And so, okay, guys, I think we are through with what we wanted to ask. But you guys have got a lot of questions out there. So we'll start with the basic question. We said the three most issues, common issues around special needs. So, Doc, what are the three most common special needs questions which you see every day?
So often, difficulties in learning is what manifests. Child not being sociable is also a need. So, not interacting in an appropriate manner with their peers and the social system around them. And children who are unable to look after themselves at all, like, from, the basic activities of daily living. So I would say those are the three main things if I were to think about. Of course, when you look into it deeper, you might come out with categories of diagnosis, but what you would see would be these.
Okay, the next question we got is, how can teachers help children with special needs?
Okay. Now, this depends on the context. So if you're a special needs teacher yourself, or whether you're in a mainstream school and looking after somebody with special needs. Okay. So if you're in mainstream school with a child with special needs, it will take a lot more of your time. So you've got to be prepared to give that child a bit of time in terms of observing them and making your own assessments or appraisals about the child. If you feel that there are certain things that the child may need additional help with, bring it to the notice of the caregivers as early as possible. But please do it in a sensitive manner.
Okay, sorry? Guys, before I ask the next question, please share your email IDs, because we are doing a lot of other programs in the future and it would be nice to keep in touch with you. And you could write to us with issues you face. So let's see what we can do together.
Yeah.
The next question is, how can you help a child who is not social and communicative?
Okay. I think this is about, again, understanding why this person is not social and communicative. So it may not be necessarily an intellectual disability. It may be other factors. A child going through a bereavement, loss, change in school. There may be a lot of other factors that is presenting as social withdrawal. So do seek help if you think it's either your child is more uncommunicative than before. Always, any change in your child, a sudden change in your child should get your alarm bells ringing. So if you've got this very cheery child who's always chatty and all of a sudden doesn't want to go out, doesn't want to talk to anybody, then you need to go and seek help at that point. Something,
Now, what about if a family has got two children? Yeah. One needs special needs, and the other one is normal as per any standard. Okay. So how do the parents deal with it, with the situation?
This is actually a very difficult one, because you have to take into account the child who doesn't have special needs. Often they grow up with a lot of resentment, thinking, mom and dad love the other child more. So I think it is about creating activities or spaces where the family interact with each other, but also creating separate spaces so that you have certain activities that you do with your child with special needs as well as the other child.
Interesting. Okay, what if one of the parents and the child have the same issue? What does the other parent do?
This again is very common. We see this in a lot of families. It may be worth talking to a specialist, maybe like a family therapist, to try and understand issues, but also it is about defining the problem, Bala. So yes, you may have a child with some certain problems, and so does your husband or your wife. But what is it that's causing problem within the family? There may be one aspect of their behaviors that's causing problems. So you may decide to talk to a therapist yourself or a family therapist to look at that particular aspect. The issues, you have to define the issue.
There is a question on adolescence. How do you deal with self-esteem issues? Does it come under this conversation?
It is, I think, it kind of comes in this, but I think it is a conversation for another day as well when we're talking about adolescent mental health, because that has its own host of problems that it comes with. But self-esteem is such an abstract concept. You don't just become confident with one activity or one interaction. It's a host of different interactions that a child is exposed to that helps build confidence.
Priyanka. I think Priyanka has something to say here.
Oh, no, I wanted to just add on to her. Like, it is true. Like, it's not just one thing that defines the self-esteem. But I do see that a lot of children who find it hard to fit in school do come with self-esteem issues. And it has got a lot to do with how they define themselves as well, like identity issues. So I've seen a lot of self-esteem issues coming out of identity issues as well. Like they don't feel they fit in the circle, and that causes like low self-esteem. So it's something, actually, it's a huge, it's umbrella term. There is a lot to deal with it inside. And I think, as she said, it's a topic that we have to cover in separate.
I'm coming to one question which is normal, is that we really don't have inclusive schools here. Not many at all. And even those who are there are not really there. So how does a parent look for these schools? How does a parent look for special educators?
It's very, very difficult. And I can tell you from personal experience, I have a relative who needs special education. And it was so hard to find a school that would accommodate him. But now I think there are certain schools where they have the NIOS scheme who are willing to offer one-to-one support. So it may be a mainstream school where there is a one-to-one, like a classroom assistant that's allowed in the class to help this particular child. But children with very severe needs do have, there's a list of special needs school. I think you get it on a government website. It's not coming to my head. I'll tell you. But if it's the mild end or the borderline end of the spectrum, they go to mainstream schools, and you may need one-to-one classroom assistants to help them. And again, that comes under the purview of the school to kind of identify that.
Yeah, so there are issues of borderline cases out there, which are not really severe, that require a special school. Do you think schools require to educate their teachers to look around for it, to identify cases?
Absolutely. I think schools have to do it. And to be fair, a lot of teachers are aware and are able to pick up children who are difficult. But a lot of the time they don't know what to do. What next? Because like you said earlier, they're met with a lot of hostility from parents. The minute they say, "Arey, something's not right with my child," fingers are going to be pointed at them, saying, "You didn't do this properly, you didn't teach them correctly." So we need to foster some kind of a sensitive communication. We need to have channels where teachers also are able to say things the way they are to the parents, as well as take in information from parents. So training programs that teachers undergo shouldn't just be focused on picking up difficulties, but also on what they do once they've picked it up. So you do need the senior management in schools to take some ownership on that.
What about education? I mean, having, educating the children themselves on these issues. Do you think it's a good idea?
I think it is. It is helpful. But it can be a double-edged sword. So sometimes when children learn more about a certain condition, they may use that to also ostracize or separate these children. So it may be used as a way of bullying as well. So in the UK, they did a study on looking at, I think, self-harming behavior and personality issues in adolescents. And they found that actually the bullying, the stigma actually increased after the psychoeducation. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't educate them. We just have to be clear what you tell them in those psychoeducation classes. So it's not just about saying, "Arey, these are the symptoms, this is how they will look." But it's about how to be sensitive. Like, I think maybe Priyanka can say this, the boy that we are working with, the peers are fabulous with this kid. I think you should probably say how well the peers have handled it.
So actually, I think students have a lot of sensitivity and commitment to these things. Like they are very supportive most of the times, but they just don't know what to do. So as she said, like it's not just about telling them these are the issues that can exist and they do exist. It's about if you see someone with this, how do you behave with them, or how do you support them, and how do you be inclusive? That is one main thing that schools too have to teach, or have to bring it in, or to address that, how to be inclusive of them in the classroom and support them. And with this boy, actually the peers were very supportive because the teacher took initiative. She actually did speak to some of the students as of to, like, this is the thing, and like, how to handle it, and the entire class came together to support boy, and it worked out very beautifully. So I think that is the main thing, how to be inclusive, and we have to address that.
But are schools required to take in the special needs children? Is it a rule or is it optional?
I don't know here. I mean, again, I probably need to look at the legislation here, but I know that across the world, there's a move to include children with mild learning difficulties in mainstream education. So I think they are required to by law in other countries. I don't know about here though, specifically about the legislation.
But look, I always wondered this question. I mean, is it really good to include them in the mainstream?
There's advantages to it, definitely. So if you look at the horizontal way of learning, where they club children of 2-3 years together, the emphasis then becomes on learning certain skills over a period of time, and children learn from peers then. But unfortunately, all our schools are now, it's what we call the vertical learning. Children of age 5 are in one class, age 6 are in one class. But if you have the horizontal block, so if you have, say, class 4, 5, 6 together, there may be certain things that you learn over a period of time, and there are common skill sets that you develop over time. So I think it depends on the kind of education system you're in.
Any parting tips, Doc, to the parents out there we got around 760 odd. Anything which they can take home and possibly use it?
I think it is about, most importantly, learn to look after yourself, because if you're not happy, whether your child has special needs or not, they will pick up on your anxiety and sadness. That in itself will make the problem worse. And for the teachers, I would say, please be sensitive. Teachers and psychologists who are working with young people, children and parents, please be sensitive when you're dealing with parents. Remember, it's very hard for a parent to understand that their child has problems. So I've seen a lot of comments here that says parents are in denial and things like that. There would be, isn't it? So psychologically, that's the defense that parents would use. So I would just say be sensitive and give people time. And always, any psychologist or anybody working with children in schools, teachers or even parents, this is one thing. Do talk about your child's strengths. Every child has something that they are able to do very well. Try and have that balance. So have a balance between saying what they're doing well and what they're not doing well.
There's one interesting question, Doc.
Yeah.
My son is 15 years old, has been diagnosed with ADHD and SLD at NIMHANS. He goes to special needs school. My worry with him is that while behavior-wise things are okay, but feels that maturity-wise is not growing. His maturity is somewhat at 11 years of age.
Yeah.
Need help, tips with points how to be able to help his age in terms of maturity, to be able to think as per his age.
The short answer is he's not going to be able to think as per his age. You've said that his mental age is that of an 11-year-old. So you have to remember that your child is going to catch up a little bit later than others. So you may see the prepubescent problems a little bit later in this child as opposed to a usual 15-year-old. So as parents, you just have to just hang in there and wait. Give your child the time.
Thanks, Doc.
Okay.
Anything else you want to add, Doc? Priyanka?
Priyanka?
Else?
Yeah.
What about he's talking about self-help among parents. Could you distort a bit? I mean, what should the parent really do to evolve themselves?
Priyanka, do you want to?
Yes,
you do a lot of self-help groups.
Right. So the one thing is that it is hard, And to validate that it is hard for you as well is very important, because a lot of parents tend to feel guilty that they're not being able to do well enough, and they get very sad when they're not being able to provide what the child wants. But at points you have to understand that it is going to be hard for you, and it's okay sometimes if you're not doing everything that you think you have to do. Like sometimes it's okay for you to take a break, sometimes it's okay if you get frustrated. So first thing is that a lot of children, they do pick up on, like, mom and dad, if they blame each other, or mom and dad not being able to, like, go well on consistently with the children, they pick up on all of these, and that actually adds on to the child's stress, as she already mentioned. So it's okay for you to, like, take breaks from time to time and take care of yourself, because that also matters in the child's mental well-being as well. So that is one thing I would like to say. And also look at the strengths, because a lot of the time when they come, it's a lot of don'ts, what they cannot do, but we tend to forget that there are so many things that they still can do and they're really good at. So enhancing that strength helps him build self-confidence, helps him identify with something. If they're not identifying with academics, give them another identity that they can relate to. So that kind of things become more important. So that is something that we have to remember. There are still a lot of things that they still can do, and focus on that a little.
Priyanka, I'm going to ask you and Doc these questions separately. What are the 3 basic mistakes parents make, in your experience, okay, when dealing with special needs children?
Sowmya, do you want to go first, or should I?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I wouldn't say mistakes, like that seems a little so because these are things.
Bit louder, Priyanka, I can't hear you.
Right. So I wouldn't call it a mistake, because I think it's a learning curve for them, because it's very new to the parent as well. So whenever they are encountering a problem, it is new to them. It's new to both parties. So that's something that we struggle with often. So there is no right thing for them at that point, because they can't understand it in the first place. So the first thing would be to understand before they react. So try and understand where the child is coming from. So that really helps sort out a lot of issues. And second thing I see is communication gaps. So that's something that happens with children often, because the range, the level we communicate in is not equivalent to the level where the child can understand. So bringing that both to the same bar and being consistent on that helps resolve a lot of issues. And third thing is emotional issues. So if you react emotionally a particular way, do not expect the child to react in a particular way, because there again a gap arises. So if they are really having a tantrum, if they are having an anger issue, so and you expect them to understand the situation, it might not happen. Sometimes they do, sometimes it might not happen. If it's not happening, then understanding where the child is coming from, or giving a different channel for them to express emotions. So that also becomes important, and that way you'll be able to deal with the emotional side of it as well. So these are the three things I would like to say that parents can sometimes focus on.
Doc, what's your experience?
Okay. First thing is having realistic expectations. So parents need to have realistic expectations, need to look after themselves, take a break. Your child, just like you need a break from your child also probably needs a break from you. So do take a break, go and meet with your friends, hang around, let your hair loose a little bit. Okay. And with schools, and I would say this, I say teachers and parents here, the common mistake they make is there becomes a them and us split. Try not to be that. At the end of the day, everybody wants what's best for the child. Where possible, work together in a consistent manner.
Thank you, Doc. Doc, just one last question before we close. It's gone back to a school question. Will the child not develop low self-esteem if he's put in a regular school?
Not necessarily. So self-esteem is so complex. It's not just your academic learning that makes you have a high sense of self. It is your interactions. It's the relationships that you form around you, the validation you get from relationships that allow you to develop self-esteem. So no, I don't think so.
Okay. Priyanka, I think this question is for you. Somebody has asked, can you list a few pen art activities? I mean, I have no idea what it means, but I'm sure you do.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part. Could you please repeat it?
Pen art based activities.
Pen art beta. 10 art-based activities.
Art-based activities.
Pen, Priyanka. Pen.
All
Pencil
right.
pen. Yeah.
Pencil pen. All right. Okay. So, I mean, I can suggest activities that are based in pen and pencil, but it might not be suitable for each child. And that's something that we are trying to create new right now. So look at what the child likes, because this is something that needs to be really addressed, that not everyone likes paint and pen, or not everyone likes sketch pens, and it's okay for them to not like. So I've had this one child whom I worked with who hated paints, who found it really silly, who said that's very girly. So, but these are the ideas that they have. But at the end, liked baking so much that that became an art that he could relate to. It was nothing to do with paint or craft, but by baking, like cakes or biscuits and decorating them. So, I mean, if you could like contact me, I would give you some activities, but it's very important to understand what they are really want, what they really want to do, and catering activities according to their needs. That works more than us giving an activity and expecting them to like it or follow it.
Okay, Doc, there's one question here. Somebody says my child was very normal, doing very well till she reached the 3rd grade. But then they changed schools and everything went downhill. Is it an indication of an issue, or is it normal?
It depends on how much time it's been since your child has developed issues. Sometimes children also, just like us, need time to get used to a new setup. So I would wait a little before I jump in and say something's happening, but it may definitely be an adjustment issue there. That's clearly evident that the transition is difficult for the child. So
Any advice for... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was also going to say that, like I said, sometimes it is during phases of transition that the problems also become prominent or evident. So it may be that as well. So give yourself some time, and if things don't get better within a certain amount of time, then seek help.
Please. Okay. Thank you, Doc. Thanks, Priyanka. I think
Thank
wonderful. We had 1 hour. We
Thank
had
you.
67 odd participants actually patiently listening to us.
Yeah.
I hope we, did some good to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And please do keep in touch. We are going to come up with a lot of... Sorry, there's one last question. Let me just take that. I think it's interesting. Shouldn't special schools have a sort of exchange program where special children regularly visit mainstream school and vice versa, so that social skill of special children improve and mainstream children develop empathy?
I think I have mixed feelings about it, because sometimes in my experience when this has happened, it's led to stigma. So like I said, it's just like a blanket thing, just educating children and saying this is what special children look like may actually lead to a stereotype as well. So I think I would look at a series of things before you looked at a special, like this exchange program. Empathy can be developed not just by spending time with a special needs child. There are other ways of developing empathy. So I would suggest be a bit cautious about that.
I so agree with you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It was a lovely evening.
Same
you guys, thanks for being there.
Thank
and
you.
We'll keep in touch. And please do keep in touch for all the participants. Thank you then. Have a nice evening. Take care.
Thank you, Bala.
Thanks, Jock. Thanks,
Thank
Priyanka.
you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
And listen, if you want to check it out, you can go to our Facebook, hoopsters.in, or Instagram, and you can check out the videos there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks. That was wonderful. Thanks, Priyanka.
Thank you. Bye-bye.